I dreamed about which button to push on this last night. Can you believe that? Craziest things. There we go. All right. Today's message is about wise guys and gals. We want to be gender exclusive, so wise guys and wise gals. And of course, I've borrowed that terminology from the mafia, right? I don't know why, but I absolutely love all the Godfather movies and all that stuff. I even like the historical channels, renditions of the mafia and all that. It just intrigues me. I don't know why, because it is pretty violent, it's pretty decrepit, but nonetheless, I like it. And as I was thinking about today's message and considering the scriptures that the lectionary put forth for us today, for this week, I thought about wise guys and what their motivation is in the mafia, what their motivation is for life. And I think it would be this. Mafia wisdom is personal gain no matter what. Right? Doesn't that pretty much sum it up? That's the wisdom of being a wise guy, of being in the mafia. Personal gain, no matter what. Now, I seriously doubt any of us are participants in the local chapter of the Consiglia, or the mafia, right? No. But every one of us is a human being navigating life in the 21st century in the United States of America. And though we probably wouldn't go out and shoot somebody, most of our culture, which influences us more than perhaps we even want to admit, is not far from the wisdom of a wise guy. We too desire things sometimes no matter what. We want a higher salary, so we're willing to maybe make some unethical choices. We want a better job, so we're willing to move away and destroy networks that we have. We really fall in love or lust with another person, and so we sacrifice a marriage to chase that lustful, selfish desire. And on it goes. I would argue that we are, more often than not, participants in the wisdom of the world, which is counter to God's wisdom. That's what we're going to consider today. What is, in fact, God's wisdom? How do we get it? And how do we use it? Well, first of all, I think it would be good for us to read about the wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon. Although Mary Ann was commenting, she don't know how he gets the label wisest man that ever lived. He had like over 900 wives and concubines. That doesn't sound that wise to me. All right, but apart from that, it was a different time, I guess. 1 Kings, chapter 2, beginning with verse 10 and then verses 3 to 14. 1 Kings 2, 10 through 12. Do you remember? Solomon is the third king of the now human kingdoms of God. Remember, up until the first king, God was the king that you stood before and you worshipped on bended knee, right? But they wanted to have a king like everybody else, and so God finally relented and gave him, who was the first king? Saul. Saul didn't do too well. In fact, toward the end, God's spirit was removed, and it says Saul was no longer in his right mind. He couldn't handle it. David, a young boy that wasn't that big, came up against the giant. They were fighting, knocked him down with a slingshot and a stone, played his lyre, his little harp, and sang beautiful music that calmed temporarily Saul's tormented brain, his emotions that no longer had the presence of God with him. And God anointed David, and David became the next king. But we know, as we looked a few weeks ago, what did David do? Even though he was a great king, most of the time, he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do, out leading his men in battle. He stays home, he's lounging around on his rooftop, which was higher than anybody else's, saw Bathsheba, lusted after her, fell victim to the wisdom of the world, and we know the end of that story. He had her husband killed, she conceived, that baby died, but then God forgave him, and the next baby birthed was Solomon. As David slept with his ancestors, in verse 10 of chapter 2 of 1 Kings, it says, David slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. The time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. And so then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. And then to chapter 3, beginning with verse 3. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David. Only he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar, maybe even 10,000. Get the point? At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." And Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in the place of my father David, although I am only a little child. I do not know how to go out or to come in. And your servant is in the midst of this people whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted, yet here I am. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil. For who can govern this, your great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, "Because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor all your life. No other king shall compare with you. If you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." You see, the first step to achieving godly wisdom, as opposed to the wisdom of this world, which is self-centered, is to approach God with humility. That's what Solomon did here, right? Solomon was granted and crowned the king when his father David, it says, rested with his ancestors, died and was buried. And Solomon, when God approached him and said, "What favor may I grant to you?" Solomon, in humility, said, "God, I am young, and these people are numerous, and they're difficult to lead. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me." Humility, right? And God gave him the wisdom that he is now known for. The reality is, many of us have learned most when we are humble and ask for help, ask for instruction. Another way of saying it is, we have a moment where we know we need to be taught from somebody more wise than us. I've had the opportunity as a pastor now for many, many years to mentor younger pastors. Not all of them have had the personality of teachability. What do I mean? Not all of the pastors that I've had the opportunity to mentor really wanted to be taught. They had an attitude that was anything but humble. They figured out, they already had it all concluded how to be a pastor, right? Well, unfortunately, several of those young men and women that I've mentored or sought to mentor who were not teachable, who did not, with humility, ask for help. And I'm not suggesting I have all the answers, but You know what? If you've pastored a couple of decades, you probably have more answers than somebody that's not pastored at all. Wouldn't that make sense? Unfortunately, those that were least teachable, that resisted with humility, no humility, learning, have made a mess out of ministry. But there have been a few that really were teachable. And by the way, many of you don't know this, but Pastor Jamie, when he first came to Meadville, sought me out. Why me, I don't know. But he did. And he said, hey, I'm a young guy right out of college. This is my first pastorate. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Would you be my mentor? And you know what? Jamie was teachable. And those of you that were at St. John's way back when he first started, you know that he needed some teaching. He was young. He wasn't very mature in his ability to pastor, but through the years, in part because of my helping him and many, many others, he's mentioned publicly that I said, one thing you need, Jamie, is you need a spiritual advisor. And around here, I think you're probably going to have to go to Erie and seek out a Roman Catholic priest that is given that gift. And he did. And he still, to this day, goes to seek the spiritual direction of that priest. He recognized that, yeah, I was right. You got to have somebody that holds you accountable in your spiritual walk and other things. But Jamie sought other help. He sought other direction, and I think we would all agree that he is way more pastoral material today than he was on his first venture on the first day of the first year at St. John's. That's the first step we all must take if we seek godly wisdom. Admit that we don't know a whole lot about a whole lot of stuff. Right? Recently, Ray and I and some others, we love to perch fish in Lake Erie, but the perch fishing just hasn't come around this year. And everybody's catching all these walleye. And you know what? We tried to do it a couple times, but we really didn't know what we were doing, did we, Ray? Right. So I sought out the advice of my brother. And he explained to me what we needed to get, and Ray got some of the equipment, and we tried it, and we learned from some errors and talked to other people. Now, we have it pretty well figured out. Caught another limit of walleye on Wednesday. You know what? Oh, by the way, last Sunday of September, you'll have the opportunity to eat some of that. Stay tuned, all right? Hey, we learned. But if we thought, well, we'll go out, we'll just keep doing it, we may never have caught any to speak of. You got to be humble. And you know what? Catching walleye is not that big of a thing in life. It's fun. We like it. But there's so much bigger things, you know, like how to survive a marriage that's not doing so well. How to deal with a child that has an addiction. How to deal with the loss of somebody who died by taking their own life. There's a lot of issues that we confront that are new to us. And if we don't seek help from God, and quite frankly, that often means seeking help from God's ministers, not necessarily professional, but those who are gifted in particular areas of godly wisdom. If we don't seek that out and say, I don't know what to do, I'm confused, I'm confounded, please help me.
You're right.
We'll never get wisdom, will we? Well, if it was just that step, we'd probably be okay, most of us. But it does take more than that, doesn't it? It also takes availability. Now, we can say we're humble, we want help, but then if we don't hang out with the person that's seeking the help, or hang out with God who's seeking the help, we don't make ourselves available for the help gaining wisdom, then we're no further along than we were before. There's a story about this in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 9. By the way, Proverbs is one of the Hebrew scripture called the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. So, pretty good place to go to seek some wisely given godly advice. Proverbs 9, beginning at verse 1. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her animals, and she has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servant girls. she calls from the highest places in the town, "You that are simple." That's a great translation. I think probably most of us can relate to that a little bit, huh? "You that are simple, turn in here. To those without sense," she says. Wait a minute. Don't you love those little tiny thin pages? Okay. "To those without sense," she says, "come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed. Lay aside immaturity, and live and walk in the way of insight." And that's a great picture, but the problem is, for many of us, we don't get it. That doesn't sound all that familiar. You know, thinking about availability to learn from somebody about wisdom, from God about wisdom, we don't usually have somebody that has 7 pillars at their house sending out maiden girls to yell to us, "Hey, you who are simple, come drink some mixed wine and eat some slaughtered animals. Spend time over here." No. That was what happened when somebody threw a feast, usually around a wedding. But in this case, it's just kind of a generic type feast. And the way you prepared for it was, if your house did not have 7 pillars, you would erect pillars of flowers or whatever, because 7 was the number that talked about being perfect. So if you want to have a perfect party, you'd erect 7 pillars of some kind of creation. And then you would mix the wine. And it was common then, because both wine and water really weren't that great. They would mix it with spices and all kinds of things, and they would make it so that it was more palatable and delicious. And they would say, "Hey, I've mixed the wine." So that would be like, that would get your antenna up, because you every day didn't normally get a real high-class beverage like that. Usually, because the water was so polluted, you mixed a little of alcoholic wine with it, usually 3 parts water and 1 part wine, so you could drink it without getting sick. But this was not that. This was good stuff. Prepared. This was top of the line, top shelf. And your attention would get up. And she says, "And I've slaughtered animals." Normally, you didn't slaughter animals for your food. You know, most of the time, you didn't even have meat back then. You'd only have, they didn't have refrigeration, right? So the only way you could keep meat was either by salting it or drying it. And you got tired of that real quick. But this is fresh meat. "Oh yeah, medium rare for me, please." Right? Good stuff. And when we hear this, when God says to us, "Hey, I have something special for you. I have mixed the wine. I have slaughtered a fresh animal. Come and consume this." Come and consume wisdom. Come and consume that which will make you a better person, like Solomon was made when I gifted him with wisdom. Come. But if we don't respond, we miss out. Have you ever missed out on something that you really wanted to go to, and you later wanted to kick yourself because you didn't make it? Yeah, I think that all of us could respond to that. Here's the invitation God's giving to us every single day if we're paying attention. Come to me, God says, or come visit these others that I've gifted to help you. Learn wisdom. Feast at the table of godly insight. Consume spiritually good food. Leave that junk food, as I was talking to the kids about, leave that junk food of the world alone. Come consume spiritual riches. And of course, for those of us that are Christians, the gospel reading for today, Jesus says, "Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you don't really get it." And of course, we're not going to focus on that. That's the truth, isn't it? To be consuming the sacrificial life of God through Jesus, and then modeling that life. But we got to be available. We got to set aside some of the other stuff in this busy, busy, busy world, so that we can actually spend time with God and godly representatives. I don't know about you, but it seems to me the world is busier than it's ever been. There are more options to consume our time than there have ever been before. And you know what? I think sometimes the Quakers and the simple people, it's a gift to be simple, it's a gift to be kind, right? I think they have something there. I think sometimes we've gotten so busy, even doing good stuff, that we've not made ourselves available to seek God's wisdom. Oh, so far I've got to be humble, and then I need help. Then I've got to spend time getting help. Isn't that enough? No, unfortunately. There's more. Then we need to stay in proximity. So, first of all, humility, availability, and now we need to stay in proximity. Proximity to God and godly people. In Ephesians chapter 5, we read of this. Chapter 5, verses 15 through 20. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time because the days are evil. So don't be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Don't get drunk with wine, that's debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit as you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts, giving thanks to God the Father at all times, and for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. How many of you do that? You spend all your time singing songs to God and praising God, and you never get involved in anything else. Anybody else here? I don't. Good for you. I sing a lot, don't I? But it's like goofy songs like Fishy, Fishy in the Lake, Come and Bite My Bait, things like that. The reality is this. Unless we, having humbled ourselves and admitted we need help, have sought that help, actually made ourselves available, unless we stick with it and continue to be in proximity of God's wisdom and the wisdom of others, we can so easily trick ourselves into thinking we've actually received wisdom, but no, we've just barely dabbled with it. We've got to hang in there. We've got to stick with it. How many of you have ever started some project or a degree or whatever, and you didn't stick with it? You failed to finish it, right? Everybody, right? Man, wouldn't it be sad to fail at developing godly wisdom? It requires an ongoing proximity to God and to God's representatives of godly wisdom. There's a new reality that, in one sense, I think is great. My daughter Kirsten's actually participating in it right now. It's called online distant learning, right? You can pretty much get any degree you want now by going online. Of course, you've got to pay for it, and connecting. And they try to make it so that there's kind of face-to-face conversations. The teacher gets online and there's, you Skype, or I don't even know what the terminology for it is today, but you try to have live interaction with the professor, the teacher, and other students. But let me tell you, I was raised on flesh, face-to-face learning. I love the Socratic approach, which is where the professor or the teacher asks questions, and then you respond, and it's that ongoing back and forth that it really makes me come alive and helps me learn. And I'm convinced that that's somewhat lost in this distant learning. It's better than nothing, and some of the online learning that really goes out of its way to make it as interactive as possible is better than the online learning where you're just interacting with a computer. But it's still not quite the same. The best way to gain wisdom, godly wisdom, is to, first of all, as I said, humble ourselves. I got to have some help. Make myself available, and then hang in there with people and a daily plan of being connected to God, ongoing for the rest of my life. How many of us are doing that? Some are, but I suspect most of us could stand some improvement in this area. We don't spend as much time in the proximity of God and godly people that have wisdom that's so necessary to navigate a godly life. And if we would just stay closer, more often, more regularly, it would be to our advantage. Oh, is that enough, Greg? Pastor Greg, is that enough? Well, there's one more. And then, we need to practice the wisdom that God has given us. And you know what that looks like? It doesn't look like the wise guys and gals of the mafia. It doesn't look like the wisdom of the world. It's a life of generosity. Humility leads to availability, which leads to proximity, which then, because we've received godly wisdom, leads to a life of generosity. And my text for this is the entire Hebrew and Christian scriptures. Did you know that's really what these entire scriptures are all about, from beginning to end? They're about God's plan for humanity was that we would be in close proximity to God, eating regularly from the spiritual food of God's wisdom, and then loving our neighbor as ourselves. Jesus, when asked, it's recorded in many places, but in Matthew 22, 35 through 40, when asked, what are the greatest commandments? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with everything you have, your mind, your emotions, your relationships, your physical being, your heart, your soul. And then the second is just like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire Bible, he says, the entire law, and following me depends on this. Practicing these two commandments. Humble yourself, humility. Make yourself available to God, and stay in the proximity of God. That's what the first one is. Love God with everything you have. And the second one is be generous. Love your neighbor as yourself. Wow. Pastor Greg, it wasn't too bad till we got to that one. Do you mean to tell me that I'm really only a godly, wise person if I'm generous? Yeah. I'm not telling you the whole entire Bible is. The way of Jesus is telling us that. In fact, what is the way of Jesus? It's God demonstrating generosity. How many of us would sacrifice our children for the sake of others? And I'm not suggesting that God is asking us to do that, but that's what God did. But God is asking us to follow that example by being other-centered, not self-centered. Being generous rather than selfish. That doesn't mean we just give everything away or that we just give to people no matter what. It's not good to enable people. Sometimes withholding is the most generous thing we can do for somebody. You understand that? I'm speaking in terms of being other-centered, being generous with our lives to the point where I will do for you even sacrificially what it takes to help you become a wise guy and a wise gal in the kingdom of God. You know, the same thing happens in congregations. In our congregations, we really typically become one of two things. We're either a church that is wise in godly ways or not. Christian Schwartz, the author of many books and the developer of the church design and ways of analyzing church life and how to make churches better. It's a very, very common process that churches use, congregations use. He says there are really two types of churches. Those that are focused on organization and those that are focused on organic. What is organic? Those of you that are taking physics or biology? Living, lives, people. You see, what happens is sometimes congregations get focused on organization, building, utilities, programs, traditions, reputation. And that can exhaust you and consume all your time. But it really rarely has anything to do with helping people know Jesus. Organic churches that focus on the life of others are people-focused. And sometimes their buildings are crumbling or insufficient, so they have to have multiple services because they'd rather spend money on reaching the lost than on building a bigger sanctuary, which is going to strap them for a long time so that life would be easier. Rather than having to preach 3 times, we'll just preach once. Do you understand that? Hey, that's really kind of behind why, at least in part, this merger has taken place. Because we have together sought to be less focused on organization, self, and more focused on organic ministry, people-centered. And this merger, we believe, profoundly will assist us in being less focused on stuff. We've got to have some stuff. We need some new carpet. I'm not talking about, there's a point at which stuff needs to be set aside.
You're right.
And we need to focus on lives. Because the last time I checked, we don't take carpet to heaven with us. Here's streets made of gold. Amen? Amen. Hey, whether for yourself or as we as a congregation seek to be wise, remember, humility, availability, proximity, resulting in generosity. Man, I think the world could use a lot of people like that, overflowing with the wisdom of God. And I think we could use a lot of congregations like that. Congregations people-centered, less than facilities-centered. Amen. God, help us to humble ourselves before you. Help us to be available to you and to others that would give us instruction to be wise. Help us to not give up on this process, but help us to realize this is a lifetime commitment to staying close to you and close to others that have been gifted with your wisdom to instruct us. God, may your Spirit help us to be generous as we increasingly learn your wisdom and your ways, as we follow in your footsteps and example. May we be both men and women, wise guys and gals of your kingdom, and a congregation that is also like that. May we be generous with your love and your goodness as you have been with us. In Jesus' name, amen.